The morning I almost died started like every other Tuesday, coffee going cold on the counter, the neighbor's dog barking at nothing, and my daughter's car pulling into the driveway 2 hours earlier than expected. I hadn't told her about the new doorbell camera. That detail, that one small, forgettable detail, is the only reason I'm alive to tell this story. My name is Walter, and 3 months ago, I was a retired accountant, living alone in the same house I'd owned for 31 years in Naperville, Illinois. My wife, Carol, passed away from pancreatic cancer 4 years back. We'd built a good life together, a modest life. People might say, but an honest one. The house was paid off. I had my pension, some investments, a life insurance policy Carol had insisted on back when the kids were small. Not wealthy by any stretch, but comfortable. The kind of comfortable that takes a lifetime of showing up to work every day and saying no to things you want but don't need. After Carol died, my daughter Rachel started coming around more. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday. She'd bring her boyfriend, a man named Derek, 41 years old. Sharp dresser. The kind of guy who laughs a little too loudly at his own jokes. I didn't dislike him exactly. I just never fully relaxed around him. Carol would have called it intuition. I called it nothing, because I wanted to be wrong. Rachel was 43. My only child. We'd had our distances over the years. She moved to Phoenix for a decade. Married the wrong man. Divorced. Came back to Illinois. When she returned, we slowly rebuilt something. Not perfect, but real. I thought we had real. The doorbell camera was not some grand plan. It was embarrassing. Honestly, I'd been having packages stolen off the porch twice in 1 month. A neighbor 2 streets over had the same problem and mentioned she'd installed a smart doorbell that recorded everything. I drove to Best Buy on a Wednesday afternoon. A 68-year-old man squinting at the display models, and a young employee named Marcus spent 40 minutes walking me through the setup. I chose the simplest one. Marcus even installed the app on my phone before I left. I got home, had the camera working by dinner, and promptly forgot about it entirely. I forgot to mention it to Rachel the following Sunday. I forgot to mention it the Sunday after that. It simply slipped my mind the way things do when you live alone, and the days blur together. The camera sat above my front door, blinking its small green light. And I went about my life. Rachel and Derek had been spending more time at the house lately. Derek had started asking questions, thoughtful questions. He called them questions about the house's square footage, whether I'd ever thought about downsizing, what the neighborhood values were running these days. He said he had a friend in real estate. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Rachel had started bringing up Carol's life insurance policy in conversation. Casually. The way you'd mention the weather. Dad, have you updated your beneficiaries lately? Derek's friend is a financial planner. He just thinks it's worth reviewing. I told her I'd think about it. She brought it up again 3 weeks later. I told her I'd look into it. The third time, I changed the subject. I noticed other things too. Small things I talked myself out of. Derek started referring to the house as this place, as in, this place must cost a fortune to heat in winter. Or this place could really use some updating. Not your home, not your house. This place. Like it was already a transaction waiting to close. One afternoon I came downstairs earlier than expected from a nap and found Derek standing in the hallway outside my home office. He said he was looking for the bathroom. The bathroom is off the kitchen. He'd used it a dozen times before. I said nothing. I walked him to it. The Sunday that changed everything started normally enough. Rachel had called ahead to say they'd be coming by around 2. I had a church thing in the morning. Came home just after noon. Made myself a sandwich. And sat in the living room with the newspaper. At 12:40. I heard the front door. I was surprised early. I thought, but the door didn't open. There were voices on the porch. I assumed it was my neighbor, Ed, stopping by to chat. I stayed in my chair. It wasn't until that evening, while trying to figure out why my internet was running slow. That I accidentally opened the Doorbell app while fumbling through my phone. The app had recorded a motion event at 12:42 p.m. I almost closed it. I almost set the phone down and watched the rest of the baseball game. Instead, I pressed play. The footage was grainy at the edges, but clear enough in the center. Rachel and Derek were standing on my porch, close together, speaking low. Derek had his back mostly to the camera. Rachel was facing it, but looking at him. Neither of them knew they were being recorded. I turned up the volume. Said we have maybe a 6-month window before the rates shift. Derek was saying, if we're going to move on the estate value, it has to be before then. Rachel said something I couldn't fully make out. Then he won't just sign it over. Derek, you know that he won't have to sign anything. Derek's voice dropped. Peaceful. That's the word the doctor used. Cardiac events at his age, no one asks questions. Especially not when the daughter calls it in. I sat completely still. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the policy pays out. Double indemnity doesn't apply to natural causes. We get the base amount, plus the house. A pause, plus whatever's in the accounts. He changed the beneficiary last year. Rachel said, I saw the paperwork in his desk. Then we make sure he changes it back first. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until 3 a.m. with the lights off and the audio clip played back 4 times on my phone. Each time feeling something I can only describe as the ground disappearing beneath a house you've lived in your whole life. My daughter. My only child. The girl I'd taught to ride a bike in this driveway. Whose hospital bills I'd paid when she was between jobs. Whose moving boxes I'd carried up 3 flights of stairs in Phoenix the summer I turned 62. I thought about Carol. About the way Rachel had cried at her funeral, real tears. I had believed. I still believe it. Which somehow made it worse. I didn't call the police that night. I was afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of what being right meant. Instead, I called my oldest friend, a man named Phil who'd been my college roommate and was now a retired attorney in Springfield. I called him at 7 a.m. I played him the clip over the phone without saying a word about who it was. Phil was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Walter. Who are these people? I told him. Another long silence. Then Phil said, you don't go to the local police first. You call the county sheriff's office. And you don't tell anyone that you know. I followed his instructions exactly. The detective who came to my home was a woman named Detective Sandra Pruitt. She was in her early 50s. Calm in the way that people are calm when they've seen things that would undo most people. She watched the footage twice. She asked me 12 questions. She asked me not to change a single thing about my routine. That last part was the hardest. The following Sunday arrived like a countdown. I made pot roast Carol's recipe, the one Rachel had always loved, and set the table for 3. Derek brought wine. He made a toast about family. I raised my glass. Through the meal, Derek steered conversation toward my finances twice. He mentioned a simple document that would make things cleaner for everyone. Should anything happen to me? He said his financial planner friend could have it ready in a week. He said it with that laugh of his. I said it sounded reasonable. I said I'd think about it. Under the table, my hands were shaking. I kept thinking about a conversation Phil had with me the night before. You are not betraying her. She already made her choice. You are surviving it. What Rachel and Derek did not know was that Detective Pruitt had spent the previous week looking into Derek's background. What she found explained the precision of his plan. His real last name wasn't Holloway. As Rachel knew him, and as I had known him, it was Mercer. Raymond Mercer. He had been investigated in 2 other states for the deaths of elderly individuals, both ruled natural causes. Both leaving substantial assets to women who had been in relationships with him at the time. In one case in Georgia, the woman had later recanted testimony given to police and moved across the country. In another case in Tennessee, the investigation had stalled when the primary witness, a neighbor, withdrew their statement under circumstances that were never fully explained. Derek Raymond had a type, not a romantic type. a financial one. He found women with aging, wealthy parents. He was patient. He was charming. And he had never once been convicted of anything. Until Naperville, Illinois. The week after Sunday dinner, Detective Pruitt and 2 additional officers from the county were positioned across the street when Derek arrived at my house alone. This time, without Rachel. He had called ahead to say he was dropping off some paperwork and that Rachel was stuck at work. The paperwork was a transfer of property document, pre-signed by a notary he had apparently paid in cash. I opened the door. I let him in. I offered him coffee. I had done exactly one thing different from my normal routine. I had left my phone on the kitchen counter with the voice memo app running. Derek placed the folder on the table. He explained it slowly, kindly, in the tone you use with someone you think is a little slow. He said it was just a formality. He said Rachel wanted to make sure things were protected, legally speaking, in case I had a health event. He said the word event the same way he'd said it on the porch. I looked at the document. I looked at him. Then I said, I think I'd like to call my lawyer before I sign anything. Something shifted in his expression, a flatness behind the eyes. Of course, he said. That's completely reasonable. He smiled again. But it didn't reach the same place. He was still sitting at my kitchen table, trying to resell me on the document's reasonableness. When Detective Pruitt knocked on the door, what happened in the next 4 minutes is not something I can describe in an orderly way. I remember the door opening. I remember Derek standing up fast. I remember how quiet he went. Not the quiet of innocence, but the quiet of a man calculating exits and finding none. Rachel was picked up from her workplace 40 minutes later. In the months since, I have spoken to more lawyers and detectives than I ever expected to. I have given statements and sat in rooms with fluorescent lights while people asked me the same questions different ways. I have been interviewed by a journalist who found the case through public records. I have received letters from strangers some kind. Some strange. A few heartbreaking from people who had their own Dereks, their own Rachels, their own Sunday dinners that turned out to be something else entirely. I still live in the house in Naperville. I still make Carol's pot roast sometimes, though I eat it alone. I changed the locks the week after the arrest. I updated my will. I gave Phil a full copy of every document. I tell these things not because they are heroic. They are not, but because they are what you do when survival requires you to think clearly while your heart is breaking. What I think about most is not Derek. He was predictable. In the end, a man who had done this before and believed he would do it again. There is a particular kind of evil that is methodical rather than passionate. It doesn't hate you. It simply accounts for you. And that is its own horror. But it is a horror that leaves evidence. What I think about is Rachel. I think about whether there was a version of the Sunday dinners that was real, and at what point the version I was living stopped being that. I think about the crying at Carol's funeral. I think about a phone call she made to me 3 years ago, the night she left her ex-husband, when she was sitting in a parking lot in Phoenix and she called me because she had no one else to call. And we talked for 2 hours. And I thought, this is my daughter. And we are going to be okay. I don't know when Derek found her, or what he offered, or what he said to make what they were planning feel like a solution rather than a crime. I don't know. And I may never know. And I have had to find a way to carry that not knowing. What I do know is this: there is a difference between trust and blindness. And for a long time I confused the two. I trusted the idea of Rachel because I needed to. I looked away from Derek's questions about the house because looking directly at them would have required me to act. And acting would have required me to accept something I wasn't ready to accept. The camera didn't save my life because I was clever. It saved my life because I forgot to mention it. That one small gap, that one Tuesday morning where it slipped my mind, was the crack of light that got through. I think about that a lot. The way safety sometimes lives not in our plans but in our oversights. The way God, or the universe, or whatever you believe in, sometimes protects us through the very things we forget to do. My neighbor, Ed, Stopped by last week. He brought a casserole. Because that is what people in Naperville do. We sat on the porch and drank coffee. And he didn't ask about the case. And I didn't bring it up. We watched the street. A kid on a bicycle. A woman walking her dog. Ed said, "You doing all right?" Walter, I thought about the question the way I've been thinking about questions lately, slower, more carefully, with less willingness to give the easy answer. I'm working on it. I said. He nodded like that was exactly the right thing to say. The camera is still above the front door. The green light still blinks. I don't check the footage every day the way I did for a while, after everything happened. But I know it's there. And there is something in that small, blinking light, something steady and quiet and permanent that I find, on the harder evenings, genuinely comforting. You build a life over 68 years. You lay it down brick by brick. The marriage, the work, the house, the daughter, the grief, the rebuilding after the grief. You believe, at a certain point, that the people you love are part of the structure. Sometimes you find out you were wrong, and then you have to decide what kind of man you are going to be in the days that come after that discovery. Whether you collapse into it, or whether you take what's left and you keep building. I chose to keep building. I don't say that like it was easy. I say it because it's true. And because somewhere out there is someone sitting in a quiet house, watching a person they love ask one too many questions about the will, feeling something they don't want to name. And I want that person to know you are allowed to look directly at it. You are allowed to protect yourself. Even when the thing you're protecting yourself from is someone you love. Especially then,